to the Ada Lovelace Day podcast. I'm Sue Anderson, and this month we have all the Sues. Nanochemist Dr Suze Kundu tells us how she's using nanostructures to extract energy from sunlight, and Dr Sue Black OBE, the founder and CEO of techmums, talks about the work of her tech heroine, computer scientist Karen Spärck Jones. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast Dr Suze Kundu, a teaching fellow at the Department of Chemical and Process Engineering at the University of Surrey. Hi Suze.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So tell me a little bit about chemical and process engineering. What's that all about?
Well, first things first, I'm not actually a chemical engineer. I just teach in a chemical engineering department. I started off as a scientist, as a chemist, in fact, having done an undergrad and then a master's degree in chemistry and then analytical chemistry. It was actually during my bachelor's that I got really interested in nanotechnology. And it was a small area of a module that we did, and it just fascinated me. Being quite tiny myself, it was lovely to find out about something that was even smaller, so small we couldn't see it, but we could see all the effects of it, of this new futuristic sounding technology. So I did a master's in analytical chemistry, and my research project was about gas sensors. And the aim was to attempt to quantify gas sensors, which are often qualitative. I wanted to see whether we could move from using something like carbon nanotubes, which can be of a range of lengths, to using something that we know the size of, like buckyballs, because they are these 60 carbon atom cages. So I was comparing different gas sensors that I was making with these two different materials. And from that, I then ended up doing a PhD in materials chemistry. And that's where my interest started to cross over into engineering. So material science and engineering is really what I do. So as a materials chemist, I'm bridging the gap between science and engineering. So I do what I like to say, the poking and prodding of stuff, finding out awesome properties of different materials and then applying them. And it's the application of those different materials in a range of problem-solving ways that really makes it the engineering part of material science and engineering. So what I specifically do is look into nanomaterials for solar fuels. So I create materials and I optimize them so that they can capture sunlight energy and push the energy onto water molecules to split the water molecules to generate hydrogen and oxygen gas. Collect the hydrogen and use it as a fuel. And it's pretty clean, it's pretty cheap, it's nice and environmentally friendly, and it's really energetic, more so, I think about 3 times more than methane. So that's basically my tiny contribution to saving the world from my little lab.
You say kind of like tiny contribution. That's actually both important in application and also quite complex. Is it as complex as it sounds?
It's actually not as complex in that plants have been able to do this for millions of years. So photosynthesis, the process through which plants capture energy to generate their own fuel in the form of glucose, actually utilizes a very similar mechanism. So there are 2 parts to photosynthesis. There's photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. And so in one of these parts, the chlorophyll actually does capture sunlight energy, and it goes through pretty much the same process to split a water molecule up into charged species. So we're kind of playing catch up with what plants have been managing to do for millions of years. Show-offs.
So how much of your work is inspired by the process of photosynthesis and what happens inside plants?
The mechanism, so the actual path of an electron, I suppose, is the part that's very much inspired by this part of photosynthesis. But actually, I think that's where the similarities stop, because we haven't been able to make the same kind of complex that plants have created in labs. It's a big mission to try and do that, and to do that as well as plants have been managing to do for all this time. But I think in my area of work, there is a lot of work that is inspired by nature. There is, in fact, whole research centres now that are based on nature-inspired engineering. There's one over at UCL, which they're just doing amazing work based on all kinds of things, but with a range of applications as well. So it's taking stuff that nature has been managing to do so brilliantly for so long, things like the super hydrophobicity of a lotus leaf, and then utilising that for either water capture or to keep things clean and dust-free and stuff. So I'd say a lot of the work that we're doing now as scientists and engineers is looking back to nature and going, well, you've been managing to do that pretty well. What can we learn from you?
And of course, nature has the advantage of not only sort of millions of years of evolution to refine processes, which, peer review can't quite sort of catch up with that. You spoke at Ada Lovelace Day Live a while back and talked about some of these inspirations from nature, and your talk has been one of the most energetic and passionate talks that we've had, I think. You're very excited about your work. What is it that really drives you?
I've always been insatiably curious, and I think to be able to have a job where I get to do that. So my job consists of not just sitting in a lab and working, but also teaching. So when I lecture my students, I just love sharing the awesomeness of science. And I'm quite lucky that I've fallen into this world of public engagement as well, where I get to share not just the work that I'm doing, but the work of other people in similar areas as well. And it just fascinates me. It's the curiosity that I've always had, and the real need to make and break things to find out how stuff works. I just love it.
It does sound absolutely fascinating. So in terms of the kind of work that you do, what sort of qualities do you think you bring to your job?
I think personally speaking, I am possibly not your stereotypical academic working in an engineering department. I think the vision of the engineer or the scientist is so deeply ingrained in so many people. If somebody says scientist or engineer, often people think of the Einstein type, the sort of middle class, middle-aged male with the crazy hair. And I don't think I fit any of those categories. I'm also reasonably good at communicating, and I think that actually bodes quite well for me. So being a woman means that I think I could potentially approach a problem in a very different way. Being able to communicate means that I can share, not only just share what I'm doing, but also decipher what other people are doing and share that with other collaborators. And I think the curiosity is what drives you, because at the end of the day, if you're going into the lab and you have no drive or inspiration or real passion for what you're doing, then you're just going to hate it like any other job. So I think having that is really important, and being able to maintain that, I think, is helped by the fact that I have these multiple facets of my role. I could have sat in a lab for my entire 37-hour week or whatever, 37 hours, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Or the reality, which may be a little bit more. But I didn't want to do that because it didn't give me that bigger picture as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think for me, to be able to shape the job that I do to suit all those things and to include all those things has been really important for me in keeping my enthusiasm and my motivation up as well.
So you're combining your research, teaching and science communication and outreach. So how do you sort of slot those things together? Because any one of those would be a full-time job for one person, but you've got to fit all that together.
The way I do it is, I guess the stuff that I'm paid to do is the research and the teaching. And once those are out of the way, there is this sort of mythical spare time that we have. And it's not really spare. I'd say it's caffeinated, borrowed time. But I do it because I love it. And I don't just get reward from doing it and sharing the science. It's really wonderful when you do a talk and perhaps a year later, which is what happened at one of our applicant days, because I'm actually admissions tutor for our department as well. And in one of our applicant days, a girl came up and said, I saw you do a talk at the A-level chemistry day a year ago, and you really inspired me to do engineering. So thanks for doing that. It's little things like that that come back to you or somebody will take the time to write an email to say, I followed up on your recommendations and I've just been offered a place here or there. And it just makes it all completely worth it.
That is wonderful, because I think often we put stuff out into the world and we never hear back as to whether it had an impact. So that's a little message for our listeners. If you've been inspired by someone, let them know.
Do you know, I do that. I always say, if somebody has done a really good thing or somebody has gone out of their way to do something for you or has really inspired you, you have to champion them, because it could be that they do that as part of their everyday lives, but the people that they have to answer to probably don't know that, because so often they're so far removed from what they're doing. So if somebody does something really decent in a shop or whatever, Sainsbury's Energy recently were great, and they managed to sort out a problem that we had. And I took the girl's name, and it was Nicola Graham, and I tweeted Sainsbury's Energy and said, Nicola Graham has done a very good job and, should be rewarded for that. I hope you know. And it doesn't take any more than a few seconds to do something like that. But these days, with things like Twitter and everything, I think you should always champion people that are doing good things. I think the TripAdvisor culture that we have is to go, oh, that was really bad, I'm going to complain vocally about that. But you've got to champion the good as well.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of some of the more challenging aspects of your work?
I think one of the most challenging things that I have experienced, and to a certain extent still do experience, is the fact that I don't fit the jelly mould of the scientist or the engineer, certainly not of the academic. My office at work is, well, there are a lot of unicorns in there, but what is life without a little whimsy? In a job like something, in academia, when things can be quite high pressure and can be, I guess, just sometimes a little bit tough. You're constantly having to battle for funding. You're constantly having to battle against the sort of bureaucracy of the system that you're in. You're constantly having to prove yourself through ref and now TEF. It can get a little bit tough. And so my way of balancing is to have just little whimsical things, cute stationery, cute notebooks, because you need something to keep you going and to cheer you up during the day. But this is not necessarily a trait that people expect from an academic. And I think I suppose I'm quite feminine as well. I'm quite a tomboy, but I'm a very girly tomboy, which is odd. And so I think when I first started to realise that this might be a problem, it was quite late on in my career. I went through school never thinking that science was gendered, and I was very lucky to have parents and teachers that never said science was a boys' subject. I went to a girls' school, which possibly contributed to that, and I had really forward-thinking parents as well. Still do. They're still very forward-thinking, thankfully. And I think going to the university that I went to as well, I just didn't ever feel different as a girly girl in science and engineering. So through my undergrad and my master's at UCL, I never felt that way, because again, UCL was a very forward-thinking, challenging university, always challenging the norm. And I loved it, and that's why I went there. But it was actually my first international conference, and I remember I was the last speaker in a 5-day conference, Friday afternoon. Half the delegates were supposed to have left by then, but couldn't, because this was the year of the volcanic ash crisis. And so all planes had been grounded. And so all the delegates said, well, we may as well just stay for the last few bits of the conference. And so I had people in my talk that probably wouldn't have chosen to stay for my talk, presenting my first paper. And I remember going onto stage in what I thought was professional attire. It was a skirt suit and a pair of heels, when the majority of people there were in jeans and jumpers, because the majority were actually men. And so I tottered onto this stage, and there was an audible sigh and a folding of arms as I got onto the stage. And I thought, oh gosh, I don't know what I've done, because I haven't even started speaking yet. And the AV guy who was setting my mic up said, I don't want to be horrible, but it's probably because you're a woman. And just left the stage, leaving me to manage this situation. And I had to battle for the first 5 minutes of this 25-minute slot, proving myself. And you know what? after 5 minutes, everyone settled in, and the questions at the end were interesting and intelligent. They'd listened to my talk, but no other person had gone up on that stage and had the same kind of reception that day. And it may have been a perfect storm of the issues that people were facing and not being able to get home, the stress of that, the disappointment that they weren't already on their flight home to go and see their families and their kids. It may have also been because I was a woman, though, and I don't necessarily feel that a man would have got that response because it wouldn't have been different to them. There wouldn't have been anything notably different about them. And so I think that was the first time that I realised I wasn't just a scientist or just an engineer. I was a female scientist and a female engineer. And being aware of that, I think, has made me realise that in certain situations, I am going to have to fight a little harder than a man that may have exactly the same credentials and experience as me. And that's annoying, but at the same time, it's certainly not as bad as it used to be. I saw Hidden Figures a couple of weeks ago, and I am so hugely inspired by that film because it was women like that, all those women, not just the 3 that we hear about in the film, but all the hundreds and possibly thousands of women, not just women, but, Black and ethnic minority women that paved the way, that pushed the boundaries for girls like me. Even my mum faced a lot of this stuff when she was working in the city as a banker in London. As a young woman, she was great at maths, but she still experienced discrimination by being a woman and being from an ethnic minority background. And I certainly don't have it as bad as they all did. And so things have changed, but I think being aware of it means that you're aware of the change, but you know that there's still a fight to be had. There are still voices that need to be heard. And so I think involving myself in things like the Women's Engineering Society, the brilliant stuff you guys do for Ada Lovelace Day, in any way, shape or form, getting behind these things and encouraging others to do so means that we'll get to that change, and we'll get to, I think you've once said this, that effectively the reason for Ada Lovelace Day is to stop Ada Lovelace Day from needing to exist, because it won't matter then. And so the Women's Engineering Society are effectively working to make themselves obsolete because it won't matter, because people are people and people can do whatever they want to do without there being this imbalance in gender or ability or religion or race or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think if I ever got to the day when the evidence showed me that Ada Lovelace Day was no longer needed, I would be so happy. I would wind it up in an instant. And because there are like a million other really interesting things to do in the world. But I think, one of the things that is challenging is that, having been a woman in tech, I know what it's like when you're kind of, the only woman in the room, and you feel quite, why should I have to put all this extra work in just because I'm a woman? And it can be a little bit frustrating from that point of view, that you sort of feel like, why do I have to be the representative? Why do I have to work harder? And I think one of the things that's important is that by highlighting all of the women who are in that situation and who are having to, put that extra effort in just to be taken seriously, I think it gives us a sort of moral support for one another of, actually we are all doing this. We're all in the same boat. We can all help each other to sort of get through this.
I think there's the element of misery really loving company, but the reassurance that you're not alone, and then creating this army of strong people that want to challenge that norm. But I think there's the other problem as well, that often women in STEM have fought so hard for so long that they're used to fighting. And I have met the attitude of some women where they've got to the top of their game and they feel that, they've worked hard to get there, and they're not as collaborative in this fight for equality. And that can really throw you as well. If you're only exposed to those kinds of women, to those really fierce women, then it can be really frightening, really intimidating. And so I think things like Ada Lovelace Day, bringing all of these women and men that support that as well together, is a really reassuring thing, knowing that there is a fight that needs to be had, and you don't have to do it alone.
And I think for a lot of the women who are very senior now, they've been through a very tough process that really rewards a sort of certain personality and a certain attitude. And I think what we are seeing now is when you look at the younger women coming through, sort of like early mid-career women, that there is a wider variety of personality types. It's not just the very sort of male personality types that are getting through. And I think, and this is what's important, when we talk about diversity, it's not just about gender or ethnicity or sexuality or religion or any of those things. It's actually about diversity of attitude, diversity of personality. It's about introverts and extroverts. It's about sort of, working class and middle class. And it's all of these axes are important. And certainly for me, the more women that I meet and talk to and learn about, the broader a swath of examples that we have, the easier it is for people to say, well, I don't have to be like this sort of stereotype successful woman. I don't have to be this sort of, sort of soul-crushing bull breaker. I can actually just be myself. And if that is high heels and beautiful fingernails, then that's great. If it's tomboy, then that's great. If it's a tomboy with beautiful fingernails, that's also great. But there's no one model that we have to follow. We can be ourselves.
A lot of the companies that are really pushing for greater diversity, as you say, yes, a lot of them start with gender because I guess, percentage wise, it's almost the easier one to try and fix first, because you're then going to be capturing more people coming through there. And with that, all the other kind of bits of diversity will hopefully increase as well. But I remember being at Diversity Day at the Royal Society 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember which one it was now. And there was a chap from Rolls-Royce saying vocally, we want more women, but we want to employ women for being them, not women that think they have to be a man when they arrive, because the reason we are wanting them to join our company is for the qualities that they bring, for being them. And so I think we probably sometimes even think, oh, well, I've got to tone that down a bit. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And I think we've got to be bolder and say, no, this is me. This is who you're employing now. This is what I'm going to be like. And I agree. I agree with everything you just said.
Violent agreement. That's always good. So tell me, just to sort of get back to your research, what are the things that you are most looking forward to? What's coming up for you?
For me, I think nanotechnology as a whole is still very exciting. And I think people still think it's quite new, but it exists in nature everywhere. It has done for a very long time. And I think what excites me the most is how much it's embedded in our past and definitely in our present, but where it could take us in the future, from things like wearable tech to mobile phones that you can roll up and put in your pocket, or, in my case, my bra, because I never have pockets. Things like that, things that make people's lives easier. And I think this is what annoys me, I think, a little bit, that working in physical sciences and engineering, people feel that because you're not working with a living thing, that there is little impact on human life. But it's technology that is enhancing everyone's everyday lives. You can't go 5 minutes without a piece of tech that has been developed over the years, improving your life in some way or another. And so I think for me, that's what I really love about the area that I work in, and STEM as a whole. Just the potential that we hold from turning, science fiction into science fact, really.
Thank you so much for giving us your time this month, Suze. It's been really fascinating.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for asking again.
Thanks to Suze for sharing her passion for her work with us today. You can find out more about Suze on our website, where you can also watch her fantastic talk from Ada Lovelace Day Live 2015, when she talked about how nature has inspired nanotechnology. You can also follow Suze on Twitter at FunSizeSuze. Our podcast is made possible thanks to the generous support of ARM, our exclusive semiconductor industry sponsor. You can find out more about ARM's energy-efficient microprocessor technology on their website at arm.com, and you can follow them on Twitter at ARM Holdings. If you'd like to join ARM as a co-sponsor of our podcast, then please email me at sue, S-U-W, at findingada.com. Now it's time to focus on an invention that you might have used this morning. In fact, you might be using one right now. It's something that's found in countless kitchens around the world, a device that some folks might feel they just could not live without. This month, we're looking at the invention of the coffee filter. There are many ways to make coffee these days. You can use a French press, which may or may not have been invented by Italians. You can use a stovetop mocha pot, which definitely was invented by an Italian. Or you can make your kitchen look like a science lab and use a vacuum coffee maker. But back in 1908, your main options were to use either a percolator or an espresso machine. A percolator works by circulating boiling or nearly boiling water through coffee grounds until your beverage has brewed. But because of the high temperatures involved and the recirculation of already brewed coffee through the grounds, a percolator can produce an overbrewed cup. An espresso machine forces nearly boiling water through coffee grounds, and this makes for a thicker brew and a nice crema on top, but the fine grounds can sometimes get into the drink. And worse, back at the beginning of the last century, washing the linen bags that were supposed to keep the grounds separate was tedious work. German housefrau Melita Benz was determined to find a better way to make coffee, a simpler way, a way that involved less cleaning of stained cloths or sludgy pots. Benz experimented with various methods for making coffee. She ended up punching holes in the bottom of a brass pot and swiping a page or two of blotting paper from her eldest son's notebook, which she used to stop the grounds escaping. And there, in a kitchen in Dresden in 1908, filter coffee was born. Benz patented her invention and launched her own company. She employed her husband, Hugo, and their sons, Horst and Willi, and together they won a gold medal at the 1911 International Health Exhibition and a silver from the Saxon Innkeepers Association. The First World War interrupted production, but once it was over, Benz continued expanding her business. By 1929, she had over 80 workers and had made over 100,000 filters. The Second World War stopped production again, but the company was back in business by 1948. Benz's company, now called Melita, is still run by her family, and her filters are sold worldwide. Baristas use coffee filters to brew your favourite beverage on a daily basis, waking up the world with a smooth, coffee ground-free cup. So as the caffeine percolates through your bloodstream of a morning, say a little thank you to Melita Benz. So joining us now is Dr Sue Black OBE, founder and CEO of techmums. Hi Sue.
Hi Sue. Great to talk to you.
It's all the Sues this month, it really is.
Sue's rock.
Before we get cracking, I just wanted to quickly ask you, what is techmums?
Well, techmums is all about teaching mums technology skills to improve their lives in all sorts of ways, and also to improve their kids' lives and their family community. So it's a program I put together, which is stuff like learning to design an app, create a website, learning to code in Python, how to use social media, staying safe online, that kind of stuff. It's accredited by eSkills, and all our mums get I'm a Tech Mum certificate and t-shirt at the end of the programme. We've been running in schools and colleges in the UK and Ireland for a few years now, and we're currently working on putting as much as possible online so we can reach 1 million mums by 2020. That's my aim.
Wow, that is fantastic. And you are a computer scientist yourself, and you today are going to tell us about another computer scientist. Who are you going to talk about?
Yeah, I'd really like to talk about Karen Spärck Jones.
And who was Karen Spärck Jones?
Well, she was a computer scientist. She studied history and philosophy at Cambridge from 1953 to 1956. She was married to another computer scientist, a famous one in the UK, Roger Needham, and they were both at Cambridge for many years together. Her area of computing was information retrieval and natural language processing, which is interesting for me because when I did my final year project many years ago, as part of my degree, I tried to build, it was very hard, I tried to build a natural language interface to a database. And that sounds like quite an easy thing to do. Well, if you're a computer scientist, I think it does. But this was like in 1992. And it's just amazing for me to kind of see what's happened in the whole natural language and information retrieval area since then, because that was like the early days of the internet, really. You know, as an academic in sort of 94, starting my PhD, it was only really academics that were online in the UK anyway. So Karen Spärck Jones did some really early work in this area, in the sort of information retrieval area, which has now been used and now is used in many of the search engines that we use every day. And she was kind of 25 years ahead of her time, I think.
Yeah. So tell me, what is natural language?
So natural language is like the language that we speak. So, you know, not like a computer language, not like C or Prolog. Don't know who knows about those languages. Or, you know, Pascal. I could go on forever about programming languages because there are thousands of them. But natural languages like English, French, German, you know, a language that we would use to talk to each other. So it's trying to get computers or a computer to understand our natural language. And we've kind of got used to that now, right, with like Alexa and Siri. But, you know, when I was doing my PhD, those things were kind of very much science fiction kind of things. I just, you know, if you told me then about Alexa, I would have been, oh my God, you know, I just would not have been able to believe that I could have something like an Amazon Echo in my home, talk to it, and it would understand me. It was very, very kind of a far-fetched thing.
And what is it about natural language that makes it difficult for computers?
So natural language is extremely complicated. And I don't know how many words there are in the English language, but there are lots. And there are also, if you think about speaking to a computer, there are lots of different accents and, you know, different ways of saying things. So it's just like a multitude of complicated issues that you need to deal with for a computer to understand human natural language. So that's where kind of Karen came in. Well, actually, her stuff was to do with processing documents and looking at how to work out of, you know, like, I don't know, say 1,000 documents, which ones were most relevant to what someone wanted to look at.
And we kind of take that for granted now a little bit, but actually it was a massive challenge at that point. And so there is this sort of great story that I love about her building a thesaurus. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, so I think that's how she started, wasn't it? When she first started working in computing, she wanted to produce a kind of online, oh no, it wouldn't have been online, would it? A thesaurus. I'm so used to the world being online, I just can't imagine a world that wasn't. To produce a thesaurus, like an automatic thesaurus on a computer. So, you know, there was Roget's thesaurus, which, you know, I had at school as a book, and she wanted to computerize it, automate it. And so, you know, I think that was one of the first challenges that she had in her research career. And she went on to kind of use things that she learned from doing that to create these kind of algorithms that could then be used to identify sort of good matches with documents that you might want to look at. And, you know, so you can see from that explanation that, of course, that's very relevant to internet searches and search engine searches these days.
And of course, she was working fairly early on in the history of computing. And so when she was working on this thesaurus, and this kind of boggled my mind, was that she actually coded it all onto punch cards.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just how it was done at the time. And I kind of just missed that time. But I kind of feel like I would have really enjoyed it. But maybe that's because I'm a major geek. But I just think, yeah, I mean, I have stories from friends who are just a little bit older than me who worked in computing kind of before me in like the 70s and 80s who used punch cards. And so they would have to, they would have to send all their programs off to have the cards punched, I think, and then they would get them back and kind of run their program using the cards. And then if they'd made a mistake anywhere, then they had to like rejig it, send it all off again, and then they get the cards back again the next day. I think that's how it worked. I'm sure I'll get lots of people getting in touch with me if it wasn't.
But it was kind of like a massive undertaking. We kind of think, transcribing the whole of Roget's Thesaurus, it was a huge job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, can you just imagine? I mean, I don't know how many words are in there, and how on earth you would work out how to connect the words together, because that's the complicated bit, right? Is how to make sure, because I think she thought that Roget's Thesaurus wasn't good enough, and she wanted to create the version on the computer. She wanted it to be better than the book. So yeah, incredible stuff.
So she went on to work in document retrieval. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think her major contribution was around the term frequency, inverse document frequency algorithm, which she came up with in a paper called Index Term Weighting in 1973. So term frequency is how, just what it sounds like really, is like how often is a particular term used in a document. So the example that's given in her papers is the brown cow. So for that kind of phrase, how often are those terms used in a document? So if you want to find, if you're trying to find documents that are relevant to your search and the brown cow is what you're looking for, then you could search for all those terms in all the documents and have a look at how often, like the frequency of those terms occurring in the documents. So that's a kind of starting place, and then you could get rid of all the documents that didn't have those terms in there. But then the inverse document frequency part of it is, as you can tell, that would help a little bit, but it wouldn't really get you exactly what you wanted. So the inverse document frequency was looking at, in any particular document, those terms. So if we take the word the, for example, that's obviously going to happen in most documents. There's going to be a very high frequency of the word the. So the inverse document frequency part of it is kind of the opposite of the frequency. So if it's very, very frequent, it would add a low weighting to it. And if it was less frequent, it would add a high weighting. So for example, if your document were, as would be quite likely, your document would have lots of thes and probably less cows, the word cow, less instances of the word cow. So, so documents where there are specifically lists of cows in dairy farming or something, the word cow will be very frequent. So it's it's not looking at documents in general, it's looking at these specific documents and giving a weighting for the specific document and using that together with the term frequency as well.
So I guess then if you have a document where there's lots of the and lots of cow, then the next word that would be rare would be brown.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And again, you can kind of actually see this in search engines, the way that they exclude sort of certain words from results. So they don't bother with and or the.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so this was used in, I think, Alta Vista. If you remember that search engine back in the day. So and so it was used in Alta Vista, I think, first of all, and that was 25 years after the publication of Karen Spärck Jones' research in this area. So it kind of shows how she really was ahead of her time.
Yeah, and of course doing this with computers that the computers we have now, the power just dwarfs what they had at the time, and at that point, kind of running any kind of search on a large corpus of material would have taken forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can't believe in my career, what's happened since I did my degree or started my PhD, just in terms of, like Moore's Law, hardware doubling every 18 months. So that's kind of carried on for the last 20, 30 years. So just the things that we can do now that we just couldn't just couldn't even dream of. Even with my PhD, the stuff that I did, I reformulated an algorithm to simplify it so that I could actually, so that we would be able to compute the answers, because how it would just have taken like 5 years to get an answer. And I was trying to shorten it down to less than a day by simplifying the algorithm. So, whereas probably if I was writing that now, maybe I should have another look at it actually, because if I was doing that now, maybe it would be easy, with the computational power that we've got these days. It's just incredible compared to then.
The era that she was working as well, this was still very much the early days of computer science and sort of like the modern sort of computer science labs and those sorts of things. And she was quite widely honoured for her work.
Yeah, absolutely. She's seen as an absolute pioneer, I think, and also she was a massive Women in Tech campaigner. So I met her a few times when I was, I suppose, a fledgling Women in Tech campaigner a long time ago. And one of my favourite phrases of hers is that computing is too important to be left to men, which kind of shows where she was coming from.
Yes, and of course at the time. We had this sort of era, very early computer programmers were women, because it was seen as quite menial work. I mean, it was sort of physically plugging things in and, feeding in punch cards and that kind of stuff. And then it sort of became seen more as a men's area sort of much later on, maybe in the mid-80s. There's a great NPR piece about this that suggests that maybe it was when... they started marketing personal computers to men for entertainment and for business. And so she was kind of like in the middle of that period where there are actually quite a few sort of women in that field.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess she was in it from the beginning because she, late 50s really, she started her work. So, that's kind of the time of Steve Shirley, the kind of, I think in those times it's probably about 50-50 men, women writing programs. And if you work for Steve Shirley, it was all women, which is very cool. And I guess she lived through that whole time really. And I came into it in the late 80s. So I guess by then it had just kind of started being really a male dominated area. I mean, like in my class, it was 90% men and 10% women. So yeah, I don't think that hasn't changed that much since then really, but I think things are moving forward. I'm kind of happy with the way things are going, but not fast enough for me ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we need to give it a nudge.
Oh yes. Well, and it kind of makes me a bit depressed really, thinking about the fact that she was a sort of strong Women in Tech campaigner, thinking that she's gone through her whole career and died 10 years ago, and we're still not there yet, So I don't want that to happen to me. Change must happen soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of people have heard of Grace Hopper, a lot of people have heard of Steve Shirley, and, obviously Ada Lovelace as the sort of mother of computer programming, if you like. Karen Spärck Jones is not quite so broadly known. I think that's something that really ought to change. We need... someone needs to write a biography of her. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, someone like Georgina Ferry, she writes great books around. She wrote a computer called Leo. I don't know if you've read that. That's a really great book.
I will have to look that up.
Maybe I'll tweet Georgina and say, write a book about Karen Spärck Jones, please.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking to Sue. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're very welcome.
You can find out more about Sue on our website. We've got a link to her book, Saving Bletchley Park, which tells the story of her amazing social media campaign to save one of the UK's most important wartime heritage sites. And there's a link to Techmums. If you're a woman looking to learn more about tech and how you can help your kids to understand computers and the internet, then do check it out. Of course, you can also follow Sue on Twitter at Dr_Black. You can learn more about Karen Spärck Jones as well in our first book, A Passion for Science, in Bill Thompson's chapter. There's a link to that in our show notes too. Now this month we have a copy of Dr. Helen Chersky's new book, Storm in a Teacup, The Physics of Everyday Life, in which she uses physics to answer some vexing questions such as Why does it take so long for ketchup to come out of a bottle? And how do ducks keep their feet warm when they're walking on ice? To win a signed copy of Storm in a Teacup, just leave a comment on our Facebook post about this episode and let us know which woman in STEM you most admire. There's a link in our show notes to the right Facebook post just to make things a little bit easier. We'll choose a winner at the end of April and we'll let them know with a comment on Facebook. Now, if you want to see Helen talking about her book and her work, then get yourself along to the Scarborough Book Festival at the end of April. She'll also be at the Hay Festival in May and the British Humanist Association Convention in June. There are more details on her website at helenchersky.net, and obviously we've a link in our show notes. Now, if you remember, in January we were giving away a signed copy of Dr. Helen Scales' Spirals in Time. The winner of that book was Cassie Martin, so congratulations, Cassie. Now, thanks again to our sponsor, ARM, for their ongoing support. If you'd like to join them as a podcast sponsor, please do get in touch. Thanks also to our editor, Andrew Marks. Don't forget that you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play and Stitcher. And please do rate, review and share our podcast with your friends. Thanks to everyone who's already helped us out with a review and a share. Next month, we're talking to cognitive neuroscientist Professor Sophie Scott about laughter and accents. And we've got author and journalist Simon Singh, who'll be talking about the work of 3 women in maths. So thanks for listening and join us next month.